Hello and welcome to ThePrint. Today we have with us Professor O.P. Mathur, Visiting Senior Fellow at the Center for Social and Economic Progress and Non-Resident Senior Fellow at the Global Cities Institute, University of Toronto. Professor Mathur's book, Changing Paradigm of Urbanization, was released recently, and today we will talk about India's growing urbanization and the challenges that the country faces. Welcome to ThePrint, sir.
Thank you very much.
So my first question to you is, what made you compile the book Changing Paradigms of Urbanization?
Partly a coincidence and partly certainly well thought out compilation of papers written over 4 decades. It was coincidental that I had just completed a major study for HUDCO on the state of the cities in latter part of 2021. And it was at that point I was wondering as to what I should be doing next. And what struck me was that my papers written over, they were all scattered in this room. I put them together and started to look at them. And the story that was coming out by looking at papers written over 4 decades was that the way we looked at urbanization in the 80s and the 90s was very, very different from what it is today. Our perceptions about urbanization have changed over these decades. Also, these 4 decades have seen remarkable development, conceptual development in what urbanization is and how it will take the world forward in the 21st century. And that really, I approached Dr. Rakesh Mohan, who was president of the CSEP at that point, asking him whether it would make any sense to put them together. Rather than answering my question, he said he'll support my effort in putting them together and assured me a research assistance. And that really clicked the whole idea, and this is what the effort is of nearly 15 months of work.
Sir, what are the challenges India faces as it transitions from a lower middle to an upper middle urban economy? You have dealt about it in this book, so can you tell it to our viewers also?
There's a lot of discussion on 2047. And the first paper in the book is that between now and the year 2047, India should be adding anywhere between 330, 350 million people to its urban population base. Much more important are 2 facts. One is that about 2027, 28, 29, about that year, the rural population in India will begin to decline in absolute numbers. And obviously the question arises, if rural population begins to decline in absolute numbers, how would urbanization be reshaped and be recounted from that year onwards? But the second question, far more substantive, is that when India changes over during these 25 years from a lower middle urban economy to an upper middle urban economy, this transition will take place anyway. There are virtually no examples where urbanization has been stopped or has been slowed down. Implication is that if we really want to make it productive and inclusive, what are all the things that India ought to do in order to ensure that this transition is a productive one, the transition is an inclusive one? The paper talks about a number of things which are really not leading India to a productive future as things stand today. To give you an example, that much of the growth that we talk about these days, and sure enough, it is anywhere between 6%, 7%. It is capital-driven and technology-driven growth. The other 2 factors of production, such as labor and land, which are very important contributors to the whole productive urbanization have not been moving at the same pace as they ought to in order to make urbanization produce the kind of expectation that we have from urbanization. Now, it is this part that is more worrisome. Only 2 days ago, the ILO produced the employment report, and it is also making the same point that our employment situation is rather not up to the mark. We have a very large percentage of people in the informal sector, and that really begins to affect productivity at some stage or the other. So the effort ought to be to make land market function properly, to make labor market function properly, and if our capital market and technology-driven growth continues at the same place, there is no reason why India would be a productive, inclusive, urban country by the year 2047.
So you were mentioning about the decline in rural population by 2032. What does it mean for India's urban population's growth and the urban labor market particularly?
So this is a natural phenomenon which is faced by every country. There's a limit to which migration can take place, and rural population begins to decline. That is the reason why you find in the developed countries that the 80% urban, 20% rural population is good enough to produce what the rural areas ought to produce for the country as a whole, as well as for the export market. So one is that it's a very natural phenomenon. When that really happens, it directly impacts a rural to urban migration, because that population is more or less stabilizing whatever level that might be. And when that really happens, question arises, where would urbanization come from? And if we go by the experience of the other developed countries and also large economies which have become urbanized in recent years, you will find that rural settlements begin to assume an urban character. They're changing their character. They're doing more occupations which are urban occupations. The whole character changes, their densities change. So much of the growth, urban population growth, will come from reclassification of rural settlements into urban after 2030, 2031, 32. The year, 1 or 2 years may make a difference, but that would become the principal source of urbanization. And that is what really is happening in many other countries as well.
But sir, do you think that the infrastructure development has kept pace with the growing urbanization in the country?
No. That is the reason why for several decades now, the centrally sponsored schemes have been focusing on water supply, on urban transport, on solid waste management, and stormwater drainage, and so on and so forth. The pace at which our basic infrastructure, urban infrastructure, is moving is far behind the requirement of the urban areas. That's one. Second, also, we have so far paid attention to basic infrastructure such as water and solid waste and waste disposal. We have not really started investing in economic infrastructure, such as Oakland Industrial Estate, which came into Delhi in late 60s and early 70s, which is an economic infrastructure. It provides an economic base. Or Guindy in Chennai. Now, this is the kind of infrastructure that is sorely lacking in our country, which really affects both the productivity of the urban areas and also the productivity of the country as a whole. So I would imagine that as we move forward, these changes will begin to take place, and our emphasis will, from basic infrastructure, we will begin to emphasize economic as well as social infrastructure consisting of education, health, etc. We'll do that. But we are lagging behind right now.
So is it the lack of finances, the lack of priority for the urban sector that led to this?
I think I will say the scale at which these are provided is much, much less than what it ought to be. Scale. And scale can be explained both in terms of finances, in terms of our capability and capacity to be able to take on that scale of basic infrastructure.
Yeah, because there was this McKinsey report, so which said that India's per capita spending on urban infrastructure is $17 as against China's $116.
Absolutely.
So do you think that there is a need for better governance and finance structure coupled with political will to collect taxes and user charges to transform our cities to meet international standards?
This has been emphasized. Earlier it was emphasized by the Zakaria Committee report that was 67, 68. But more recently, the HPC report headed by Dr. Ishra Ahluwalia, high-powered expert committee, has come out with fresh estimates. And the fresh estimates, except for these years, happens to be at least 2% of GDP we ought to be spending at least 2% of the GDP on basic urban infrastructure in order to move the economy on a level that India sorely lacks in order to become either a developed country or a more urbanized and more economically productive country. So we need to invest more. There is no way in which we can survive and make our cities, whether it is ease of living or whether it is economic growth, all of them are hampered and jeopardized by lack of investment. We need to pay more.
So the government had, if you remember, way back in 2015, they launched a program, a mission to develop 100 smart cities in India. So 10 years down the line, have Indian cities become smarter? What do you think? And also, do you think that technology is a way out, technology for reordering how our cities behave? Is that the solution?
Let me say by way of introduction that the idea of making some cities smart was outlined in the 12th five-year plan.
Oh, 12th five-year plan.
12th five-year plan. But it was not picked up by the government on the ground that India is not yet ready to really invest in smart cities. But in 2015, the decision was taken to develop 100 smart cities, but they are really not 100 smart cities. There are parts of the cities which are being developed as smart. That is number one. And the second point is that flexibility has been given to all states to define how they would like to interpret the word smart. And therefore, there is no one single concept that defines quote unquote smart cities in India. So if you go to Bhubaneswar, you will find priorities being given to some other sectors compared to Pune or compared to Surat, and which are also being developed as smart. But the more important issue is, or perhaps two issues, it's definitely technology driven. So whether it is CCTV cameras or the integrated transport systems, they're all being driven by technology. My concern is that developing a small part of the city as smart does not take us very far. That would have been much better if we had decided that we will develop 10 cities as smart cities, but take them holistically in order that it really becomes some kind of example for other states and other cities to follow. That's one.
Instead of a piecemeal approach of developing a small area within a city.
Absolutely, absolutely. That doesn't really help very much. Even today you will find that some areas are better developed compared to the other developed. So that really, now there would be some more developed compared to others. And you will begin to see these intra-city differences far more starkly as you move forward. Also, when I talk about the technology, there's no getting away from it. There's no getting away. If you see, for example, what South Korea is doing in one of these smart cities, there are sensors all over the house. Sensors have been planted in that if you really want your face to be washed, you put your face with against the tap, and the water comes straight away on your face rather than elsewhere. Or if you want to really open your door, you have a code or something that you press that and the door automatically opens, and likewise the windows automatically opens if you want the windows to be open or windows to be closed. So technology will come anyway. If we plan it better, the impact would be sharper, and we'll move towards our goal of developing smart cities. If we allow it to happen in a sort of as it comes, then it will be more expensive, and I do not think that would be a right approach to it. It's like some part of a room gets the smartness, it look very good, but rest of the room looks terrible. I do not think that is the kind of urbanization we are looking for.
So, sir, what role can private players play in India's urban renewal? Because if you see right now, the presence of the private sector has been very limited.
You are right, private sector has been very limited, partly on account of our land policies. When the book was being launched, the Nandandela Infosys and all the electronic city which is there were villages. And the decision to create separate, away from this main city was taken because city could not take the load of the very large number of cities coming together. So the whole point being that our land market does allow a further expansion of the city in a way that cities ought to develop further. Whereas Delhi is a very typical example that more or less we have reached a plateau, that beyond this level another city becomes, and that is Gurgaon. Likewise on the other side it is Noida which comes, and the Delhi stops there. So we run into these issues, and we will continue to run into issues unless we have some kind of a medium-term plan. That is how our future development takes place. Now, there are examples also like Dholera on the DMIC front. But DMIC was supposed to have 24 cities of the kind that Dholera is. And only one city over the past 20, 30 years has really come to a place which we can say it is on way to development. So developing a new city is not such an easy option. It is both expensive and it takes a very, very long time. We have the example of Chandigarh with us. Chandigarh has taken almost 60 years to become a 1 million city. If that is the kind of the development, that is not the kind of development that India can afford. India needs to manage its urban growth much faster, and that can happen within the confines of the existing cities rather than banking on the new cities. I don't think the new cities will be an affordable option for new urbanization.
So many Indian cities, including Delhi, if you see, have seen a mushrooming of slums, unauthorized colonies. So, which is again reflective of our cities having failed to keep pace with the influx of population that has happened, maybe from rural areas or tier 1, tier 2 cities moving to the metropolitan cities. So, how do you view this?
See, Delhi. The slum growth in Delhi was really after 60s to 80s, where slums really flourished in Delhi, and people were occupying lands on a massive scale and setting up their units there. My figures show that the trend has somewhat slowed down, and the slum population as a percentage of total city population has been stable in some cities and has been declining in most cities. But it was both the rural push of the 60s when there was a drought. The drought years of the 60s really pushed a very large number of population from the rural areas into cities, and you will also find papers here which gives you the rates of growth of urban population. These are the years, these are the decades where population really grew very, very fast.
So the 16th Finance Commission Chairman, Professor Arvind Panagria, when he was in the Niti Aayog, had said that we need to genuinely devolve power to urban social bodies and financially empower them. So now, as the 16th Finance Commission goes about with its task, what are the challenges they face as they look at finances of urban local governments?
This will be one of the big challenges that the chairman of the 16th Finance Commission is going to face in making recommendations under Article 283C, which is recommendations for the municipalities. There are two reasons why I'm saying this. One is that 5 finance commissions in the past, beginning with the 11th Finance Commission to the 15th Finance Commission, have experimented with a variety of approaches in dealing with this mandate in respect of the finances of municipalities. And when you review these recommendations of these 5 commissions, you will find that there has been a genuine increase in the recommended grant in aids by the successive finance commissions. The shares of the recommended granted aid increasing from about 1.8, 1.9% by the 11th Finance Commission to about 10.5, 10.6% by the 15th Finance Commission. Municipalities could not have asked for more. The difficulty has arisen is that countrywide, these grants made by the 15th Finance Commission has been, the own resources have declined while the grant made by the finance commissions
has gone on increasing.
So there has been this substitution effect, and the overall is that it's a zero-sum game. What the municipalities had earlier at the time of the 11th Finance Commission and what they had at the conclusion of the 15th Finance Commission, it is still 1% of the GDP. That figure stays and stares you in the face. That no matter how the different finance commission approached it, the overall figure of the revenue, municipal revenue, remains stuck at 1% of the GDP. So the biggest challenge that Dr. Panagria will face is how to move this needle from 1% to whatever he can possibly do that. This is one challenge. A second challenge that has also, which is a very strong trend, if you review the reports right from the 11th to the 15th, you will find there is a trend towards giving more tied grants rather than open-ended grants. That is, grants tied to certain sectors or spaces, that you will spend that grant only for these services, and if you are not able to do that, the grant will stand surrendered. Now, if just think the implications of this. A body as important as the 15th Finance Commission, a central government body, is fixing up the development priorities of the local level. Almost saying that you are not competent enough to really lay down your development priorities, and it is really meant for us, or it is designed by that we set what you ought to be spending money on. If we go by what the original intentions of the 74th Constitutional Amendment were, that there would be greater autonomy with the urban local governments as we implement the 74th Constitutional Amendment, that objective, that goal, stands completely frustrated by the way these successive finance commissions have approached their mandate. And that is my significant worry, particularly in the light of the quotation that you gave at the very outset, that we need to
devolve power
and
to urban social bodies.
Not only powers have been given to them, but even what the powers that they had, even those powers are shrinking and have shrunk over these years. And the functional domain, which they had, let us say, before the 74th Constitutional Amendment, that had been overloaded with either saying you spend money on these services, or even new activities such as pollution control, such as climate change, the variety of things which are being loaded on them, which are really functions for which local governments are not prepared to deal with.
So what is a way out, sir, to make our urban local bodies, to make our municipalities self-reliant? Because that's at the core of all
that
this.
objective has been completely frustrated. They are more dependent on grants today than they were when the 74th constitutional amendment came into being.
So what is the way out?
I think we need a fresh look at it. I think we need definitely a fresh look. There are many more challenges which have come in. There's no doubt about it that India will have to deal with issues of sustainability, issues of climate change. What role would local governments perform in the planning and implementation of these services, I think becomes a very important function. And it cannot be done simply by tweaking this or tweaking that. It requires complete reimagination of local government functions and finances in the light of the Article 283C. That would be my reaction to that.
With this, we come to the end of this interview. Thank you so much, sir, for talking to The Print.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity of sharing my thoughts on it.